Have you ever gotten so frustrated trying to fly your FPV drone that you start wondering if it's actually harder than it should be? Well, if your drone flights are looking a bit more like this rather than like this, there is a very good chance that you're making it so much harder without even realizing it. After helping a bunch of beginner FPV pilots improve their flying and reviewing even more flight footage, I've started spotting the exact same key mistakes over and over again. So in this video, I'm breaking down the flights of 3 beginner FPV pilots, each stuck on a completely different challenge, and I'm showing you exactly how to fix them fast. This is Leonardo, who's told me that he struggles with successfully pulling off tricks without crashing. But before I get to the main problem stopping him here, there's actually something killing his precision, and it could be killing yours too without you even knowing it. I want you to direct your attention to this number here on Leonardo's DVR. This is a representation of his throttle percentage, so how much throttle is being used between 0 and 100%. From what we can see, this number seems to go about as low as 20 and about as high as 40, which means he's flying at around a 20 to 40% throttle input consistently. Now, you might be wondering how something like this is a precision killer, right? And the easiest way to show you how is by showing you this beautiful graphic. If this equals 0% on our throttle and this equals 100%, that would mean Leonardo would be flying the majority of his flight in between this range here. That's leaving 80% of his throttle range basically untouched, which also means that he has got 80% less control than he could. You see, the more stick resolution used, meaning more stick movement, the more microcontrol that you'll get. If Leonardo were to increase his throttle from 40% max to 80% max, he'd be gaining an additional 40% of control back. But of course, this is impossible because then it'd be flying way too fast, right? And yeah, this is true unless you just change this one super simple setting in Betaflight. Under rate profile settings, change this number here from 100% down to 80% and select scale under throttle limit. This is going to effectively cut the power output of your drone down to 80% instead of 100%, which in Leonardo's case will allow him to have more control over his throttle, and it's also going to give him so much more room to make micro adjustments. So to see how much of your throttle you're using, just add the throttle position to your DVR, record a couple of flights without focusing on it, and then have a look back at it afterwards. Now if we move forward and address the real problem, being unable to pull off tricks without crashing, there's one simple thing that I would try. This thing is going to take Leonardo's flying from something like this to being so much more confident and able to do this sort of flying in absolutely no time. What you need to do is apply the DECC, also known as the DEC. This stands for the Drone Environment Confidence Check. Get your mind out the gutter. And it's based on just 3 things. 1, the drone that you're flying. 2, the environment that you're flying within. 3, it's not showing up on my script, so we'll just have to skip number 3, I guess. 3, what you were trying to achieve. Based on these 3 things, you then decide how confident you feel flying in that situation. And look, I know it sounds cheesy and a little bit bullshit, but seriously, it actually works wonders. As an example, if I took a 7-inch drone and told myself that I need to freestyle it inside of my living room, my confidence level it's on the floor. It's so low. If, however, I swapped out either the drone for a tiny whoop or the environment for a massive field, my confidence is going to be super freaking high because, you know, I'm flying a tiny whoop inside or a 7-inch drone in a field. It's fine for me. In most cases, however, your decision isn't going to be quite so black and white when starting out, so it's important to actually try and assess this the next time that you're out flying. In Leonardo's case, he's flying a 5-inch FPV drone in a reasonably complex environment. I say complex because there's a lot of trees, there's barely visible power lines, bastards, and low to the ground signs which you could smash into. All of which, look, it might not be too bad for cruising around, but when it comes to trying tricks out, we can see that his confidence isn't there just yet. To perform any trick, Leonardo heads out into the limited open space that there is, does the trick, and then heads back into the trees. That means at this current stage in his journey, he would actually be better off in a higher confidence environment like a large wide open field. Something with no trees, no power lines, and definitely no height barrier like an underground car park. From here, he'll be able to give himself some breathing room. He'll be able to fly up higher than he normally would and try whatever trick he wants. If at any point you start to feel super out of control while in a high confidence environment, then it's definitely worth practicing the specific trick a bit more in a simulator. But look, if it's just the thought of crashing that's giving you a couple of nerves, allowing yourself to have the extra height is going to be a great starting point. Now, as time goes on and as Leonardo starts to feel more confident in his ability to do the trick, he can start to lower his height or try doing the trick in a busier environment. I do have to say here though, if you're doing this for yourself, don't change too much at once. Just stick with small incremental changes and you'll feel your confidence building up stronger than ever before. But what if you're more like Aussie Doggy? I'm going to shorten their name down to AD for now, as otherwise it's going to be an absolute mouthful to keep on saying. Aussie Doggy. But we'll just go with AD, okay? So AD has told me that they struggle with being accurate and hitting small gaps. Same, bro. But after watching through his flight footage, I can actually tell why. For AD, there are two things that need to be changed, both of which can be done in just a couple of minutes, and they're going to take them from feeling like they're out of control to being absolutely locked in and able to hit whatever gap they want. So what are these two things? Well, let's start off with the easiest. This here is your FPV drone camera, and aside from letting you see what the drone sees, pretty helpful, right? It's actually the main factor for controlling your drone's speed. The higher the camera angle, the faster you'll fly, and from watching AD's screen recording, I can see that their camera angle is set to 38 degrees. This is way too high for most flying, even for most experienced freestyle pilots, with the exception being experienced racers. In AD's case, however, regardless of whether they're trying to learn to race or not, this angle needs to be brought the heck down. I usually recommend an angle between 5 and 15 degrees, which will take your average speed from looking like this to something more like this. With this slower speed, you're able to start getting your mind thinking about what's next, which in turn gives yourself the benefit of becoming a much more accurate pilot. But then if going slower is going to solve most of the issue, what's the point in this second thing? Well, honestly, this is a setting that I wish I had changed so much earlier on in my FPV drone journey, as since I've changed it, I've basically never needed to change it again. What I'm talking about here is your drone's rates. I know rates can seem big and scary if you don't know what they are, but if you just follow what I'm about to show you, it's going to take you 10 seconds to do and you're not going to have to think twice about it. Rates are basically the sensitivity of how your drone reacts to your controller stick inputs. The higher the number here, the faster your drone is going to react to the same stick movement. So by changing these bad boys from standard to what I'm about to show you, it's going to take your movements from being jerky and overcorrecting to smooth, flowy, and just precise. Simply head to the presets tab in Betaflight, search up 533 and select the 533 racing rates. But before you freak out and think, oh my god, racing rates, I am not a racer. I need you to calm the hell down, because you'll actually be surprised to hear that most racing rates are remarkably slower than most freestyle rates. Yeah, unusual, right? But it actually makes them the perfect starting point, or if you're like me, a great place to stay as well. Yes, these 533 rates are exactly what I use on all of my quads, from racing to cinematic to tiny whooping as well. But if you're finding you're more like Port and you're struggling with one specific trick, then what I'm about to show you is going to help solve that. You see, Port has told me that they struggle with power loops when using a tiny whoop, and as soon as I watched Port try to do a power loop, I could see the two problems making it so much more difficult for them. But instead of just solving Port's power loop problem, I broke it down even further and figured out what the massive underlying issue is that most beginners struggling to do tricks suffer from. We'll get there in just a moment, but firstly, what is it that Port needs to focus on? Well, from what I can see, the throttle is being dropped way too early and there isn't quite enough commitment to the whole loop. So if they were to just focus on pitching back a bit more and holding that throttle for just a little bit longer, they'd pull their whoop over the top of the pole, creating a power loop. Yay! Now, I get it, that is very specific, but the second solution to the second problem is something that everybody can benefit from. When trying to do a trick like a power loop, instead of picking an object with a super low margin of error, meaning the low height of the power loop pole from the ground, try to find something that gives you a lot of slack with your height. The lower the object is to the ground, the less time you have to react and pull your tiny whoop out to complete the loop, but if you give yourself more height, you'll find your reaction time can be just a little bit slower, allowing you to start building some good habits. Speaking of building good habits though, this is where we get to the massive underlying issue that I see a lot of beginners suffering from. Have you ever tried and successfully pulled off a trick in the simulator, only to find out that as soon as you try in real life, it's literally impossible to do? It feels like you have to relearn the whole thing from scratch again, right? Well, there's one main reason for this, and thankfully, it's a super easy fix. You see, most beginner FPV drone simulators have a standard FPV drone that you start off with. It's often just a regular 5-inch drone with all the stock standard settings too. Now, as I'm sure you can imagine, a 5-inch freestyle drone flies completely differently to a tiny whoop, which also flies completely differently to a race drone. So if you practice with a 5-inch drone on a simulator, and then you go and try the same stuff with your tiny whoop, there's going to be a huge disconnect in skills. But if you think that just changing your drone type in the simulator to match your real life drone is going to fix it all, you're actually only halfway there. If you've got a drone that has a throttle limit, a throttle expo, or different rate setup, this is yet another bunch of variables that make your IRL drone fly completely differently to your simulator drone. So after you've picked out a drone that is either the same or similar, you then need to follow on with the same trend and make sure that all of your settings match up too. Adjust those rates in the simulator, make sure you have the same camera angle, change the throttle limit. You get the idea, right? By matching everything in your simulator to how you have your IRL drone set up, the next time you try and learn a trick in a simulator, you're going to find it actually transfers over so much smoother. But there's actually one more thing that you need to make sure that you have checked off if you want your simulator skills to carry on over to real life. And that thing is your simulator's physics. If you're flying in a simulator that doesn't replicate, say, real life wind resistance or solid gravity, or even have a good choice of drones, you're setting yourself up to have a really hard time. That's why in this video, I tested every FPV drone simulator to find the absolute ultimate sim, regardless of whether you're still learning the basics or if you're trying to master a trick. Whatever it is you're trying to do, there is a simulator that is best for it. And you're going to find out what that is by watching this. See you over there very, very soon.